What's going on, guys? Matt here. So today we are looking at the LionSteel T6. Now you guys have seen this on the channel before. I've kind of brought it out for some comparisons and stuff like that. And you guys have probably heard my enthusiasm about this blade. My enthusiasm is still there, but there are a couple things I do want to mention with this blade. And we'll kind of get into that kind of in what's unique probably, or, kind of throughout the video. So we're going to talk about specs, what I like, what I dislike, and something unique. But first, let's do some size comparisons real quick. So let's compare it to its little brother, the T5. So the T5, as you can see, about an inch less on the blade. The blade profile is, you can see how much more width to that blade, the T6, there is. I mean, it's a much larger blade. There's one thing I want to point out about the handle, or I guess a couple things about the handles on these. First of all, if you're looking kind of at the differentiation on these two, obviously you have the length, but also the texturing on the handle is quite a bit different. This has more of a smooth texture. Now it's still very grippy because it's micarta, but this has kind of a sunset pattern, I guess you could say. And then the guard. So the guard is built into the tang on the T6, and the guard is just, part of the micarta handle on here. Both have really comfortable handles on these blades. And then we'll just compare it to one more. Let's compare it to a classic cold steel SRK. Very similar in size, a lot different in weight. I think this is like 9 ounces or something. This is about 13.5. But similar, about 6-inch blade length. There's a little bit of a shorter handle on the SRK. Kind of different knives. Yes, they will serve a similar purpose, I would say, but this is kind of more Becker BK2 and, SE5 kind of category, I would say. Okay, so let's get into the specs, and then we'll get into the rest of the stuff. So for the LionSteel T6, you were looking at a 6-inch blade. And now it says it's a quarter of an inch on Blade HQ's website. I had heard it was 0.23. So we are going to measure this thing with the trusty calipers. And we're going to inches, right? So at its thickest point, yeah, that's what I thought. So at its thickest point, let's see. 0.21 is what we're reading. So, it's probably around 0.23. Just under a quarter of an inch is what I would say. It's not quite a quarter of an inch, which is what Blade HQ has on their website. But still, quite a beefy knife. It's going to be thicker than the knives we just showed in comparison. So on this one, we have a 3V blade steel. It also comes in K490. Micarta handle, and it comes in a stonewash or satin, different color handles. That thing has a Kydex sheath. I'll show you that real quick. Nice Kydex sheath. It weighs 13.4 ounces. It is made in Italy, like all LionSteels, and to buy it, you're looking at around $300. They go for a little bit less sometimes on sales, but generally for either version, you're looking at about $300. So let's get into what I like. So guys, I've talked about it, on the channel, if you've kept up with the channel. I love the looks of these. I love the looks of all these LionSteels. Part of that has to do with the handle. Part of it just, I think the lines are really clean. The fit and finish is really good. And so they just put a lot of effort into just not making these kind of boring drop point blades. Essie, I love Essie, make great knives. Their blades are kind of boring looking, most of them. These have kind of some design flares, some extra machining into them, and I think it really improves the look. I think they're very pretty knives, with also being functional. So just the overall look, the aesthetic, very, very nice, very different. You don't see a lot of this in the knife world. And so, yeah, I really like the looks. Another thing I really like is the handle. Handle comfort on this is excellent. Very well contoured. You guys know, and I actually have an extra handle I'm going to show to you. And we'll get into a little bit of why I have this extra handle. So this is how the LionSteel handles work. So it is one piece of micarta, and what happens is that tang is just slotted into there. So this is about as comfortable as a kind of micarta or G10 handle could be, I think. Very, very comfortable. Sturdy, it's just a very, very well done handle. And I think LionSteel really prides themselves on their handle designs, as well they should, I think. Another thing I really like is the balance. Now, this in comparison to the SE5 or like the Becker BK2, this feels much more balanced. And I think it's because it's a little less thick right here. it tapers off quite a bit to that point right there. And so you have a little bit of less thickness, more kind of grinding. And so it's lighter than both of those knives, but it still feels just about as sturdy as either of those knives are going to be. So I think that they did a good job of saying, hey, we're going to make a really beefy, almost 1/4 of an inch thick knife. And we're not going to make it feel kind of a little bit sluggish like those other knives. So I think that the balance is really, really well made on this. I also think the steel choice is excellent. I don't have any experience with K490. From what I understand, it's a fantastic steel, if not a little bit more difficult to sharpen. I have a lot of experience with 3V. Excellent choice on the 3V on this. Tempering seems great. 3V is just a great, you guys know 3V at this point. It's just a great fixed blade steel. The sheath is also excellent. I took off that retaining strap because you don't really need it. It comes and just locks in. No movement. It's just an excellent sheath. I will say, I think I prefer the pancake style, which this isn't. I don't think it matters so long as it locks in well and so long as it stays sturdy. So well done on this. LionSteel makes great sheaths. That's what I love about LionSteel is they just don't cut corners with stuff. This is a version of their leather sheath. It's just nice thick leather, handmade, hand stitched. It's just well done. LionSteel does a fantastic job on their sheaths. And I mentioned this before, but the last thing is the fit and finish. The fit and finish on this is just excellent. The handle, so beautifully contoured. There's no sharp edges. The only sharp edge is on this back part right here, and that is sharp so that you can strike a fire steel. So that's like an intentional choice on LionSteel's part. And I think that's smart. They give you that option kind of for your outdoors people. And also you could probably strike one right there if you really wanted to. But this is, you can probably see that, very rounded. So it just feels like a lot of machining and intentionality went into the fit and finish on this. So what do I not like? Well, I would say that tip is just a tiny bit too thin for what this knife is intended for. It's probably not too thin, but for me, I would say I would have liked a little bit more beef a little bit further up on that tip, especially just considering how beefy this knife is. It kind of reminded me of, the Recon Scout by Cold Steel. It's like a 5/16 of an inch blade, and then it comes to such a precise tip. You wonder why they made it so precise like that, because the blade itself is meant for such hard use. So it's just a little bit more thin than I would like. Now, I also think that this is a little bit expensive. The T5 goes for, I think, about $150. You're looking at about double the price. Now, this is a lot more steel. It's a lot higher quality steel. This is a Nylox, which is a good steel. It's like a D2 variant, apparently, and it seems to perform like that. So it's not going to perform quite like 3V. Do I think it's worth double? Sorry, my dog's in the background. Do I think it's worth double? Maybe not. I would say, 30-40% more. So, $250 would feel a little bit better. So I think that this is a little bit on the expensive side, even for the materials and kind of the fit and finish and the quality and where it's coming from. Last thing I want to mention, and you can call this a negative if you want. I'm going to state it, and you can decide if it's in the negative category for you or not. So the reason I have two handles is because, I'm not sure if we can see this or not. This developed the tiniest of cracks right there. You can kind of see it. Sorry, that shows how small the crack is itself. Yeah, you can kind of see that. So I noticed that, and it kind of worried me. So I went ahead and contacted LionSteel's customer service, and they said, can you send us some pictures of the cracks? I said, sure. They asked if I could send a picture of the milling on the inside, and I went ahead and sent that. They're like, thank you so much. We'll send a new handle out to you. So there is a tiny little crack. Would it keep going? I would say probably under hard use, which is what this knife is meant to be used for. It probably would continue to get bigger. So they sent me a new handle. Handle's great. It's a different color, but there you go. This is still plenty usable. I'm sure you could use this for years and it would be fine. But the positive of that experience is obviously LionSteel's customer service. Now, I know not everyone's had an experience like that, but for me, especially being in the United States and then being in Italy, the customer service experience was fantastic for me. They were really good at getting back with me, and they shipped it out very quickly. That being said, I think there might be a little bit of a design issue when it comes to this handle against that guard. Now, we talked about the LionSteel T5. There's no metal guard, the guard isn't built into the tang. The guard that you have on this blade, similar to like the Cold Steel SRK, so the guard isn't part of the tang. The guard is just, it's to keep your hand from sliding up on the blade. It's that, craton right there. The guard right here is that, it's that micarta, so that's keeping you from slipping up on the blade. The guard on here is part of the tang, and so I think that, handles, they affix to blades, but they're not exactly perfect on them, right? They will, I'm sure they move like micro millimeters. And so you're probably getting a decent amount of pressure from this guard on that, that kind of the micarta portion of that guard. My guess is that might be a design flaw. And over time, we might see some cracks on our LionSteel T6 blades. I could be completely wrong. I could be way off base. You guys let me know if you've seen any of those micro cracks. That also being said, so long as that crack didn't move, you could use this handle probably for decades and it would be completely fine. Handles wear out. I would say handles are kind of one of those parts of blades that are, they might have to be replaced over time. Like this cold steel, if you use this craton enough, it's going to loosen up. It's gonna kind of wear down. So take that as a negative or not a negative. Obviously, the positive is the customer service. The negative is there might be an issue, and I'd like to hear you guys in the comments talk about it. But what's unique? So I think what's unique about this is kind of what I feel the SC5 or the Becker BK2 kind of should be. It's a much more balanced blade. It's a much more kind of, it feels hefty in your hand, but it doesn't feel so hefty that it feels cumbersome. It feels like you can still kind of move it around. So that's what's unique. I think it's doing kind of a better version of what a lot of these tank blades are wanting to do. Now, what I want to mention is, real quick is, I talked about how this might be my favorite fixed blade of all time. And I still think it's a great fixed blade, and it is a recommend. But I don't think it's my favorite fixed blade, and I'll kind of talk to you why. It has more to do with me than it has to do with the blade. What I've come to realize is that I prefer knives that are either a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger. And I've started to really appreciate an average size fixed blade knife and also a bigger fixed blade knife. So I think that I prefer, the more I used it, and you can see that I've used both of these a decent amount, I prefer the T5 more. I think it feels more natural in the hand for its size. And then a bigger blade, which I don't have any on table, maybe like the M7. I might prefer the M7 over something like this. The reason I don't think I prefer this is it's not very good at any one thing. It's not good for fine detail work. It's okay for that stuff, but it's also really not good for it's not good for chopping. This thing cannot chop at all. It's very unpleasant with that back pommel. And so, a chopping capability that you might have with a bigger blade like this, I think is mitigated because it's not quite big enough to really do anything all that well. Whereas a knife like this, and even a knife like this, because it has a thinner profile, it's just not as cumbersome, is actually just going to do those things better. It's just going to do those smaller things better. And for the bigger stuff, yeah, it might not do it as well as this, but this isn't doing that all that well either. So right now, this is honestly probably my favorite fixed blade, this T5. I think this is an outstanding fixed blade. I think this is awesome as well. What I would recommend if you're trying to decide between the two is get them both in your hand, see how it feels. For me personally, this just fits perfectly. But this T6 is an absolute recommend. I think it's such a cool knife, and you really can't go wrong with a LionSteel in general. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video. Peace.